First of all, hello, welcome, Space for Humanity family. Thank you for coming onto this call today. We're doing this because we wanted to do this to Space for Earth webinar series because it's an interesting moment in time, and we want to navigate that wisely and sensitively. We want to host these discussions because it's part of our commitment to hosting important conversations and facilitating meaningful collaborations in the space community. And especially as we navigate the COVID-19 pandemic, we're finding there's some similarities to some of the isolation that we're experiencing now to maybe some of the astronauts have experienced on the ISS. We'll talk a little bit about that today. First of all, I want to welcome Rachel Lyons, our Executive Director at Space for Humanity. I have the privilege of working alongside Rachel every day, and that is an absolute honor. Her commitment to our mission is inspiring, suffice to say. Thank you, Rachel, for hosting this conversation today. I also want to thank Nicole for joining us. I had the pleasure of meeting Nicole at one of our events, and we had some great conversations. She's an amazing human, and I'm grateful to know her. Also grateful to have her on this talk. I love her perspective of looking at us as all being Earthlings, and she'll talk more about that, I'm sure. Nicole is a veteran NASA astronaut with 2 space flights, 1 spacewalk, and 104 days living and working in space as a crew member, both on the International Space Station and the Space Shuttle. She's also an accomplished NASA Aquanaut, and she's the founder of Space for Art, which is bringing space and art together for children around the world. Nicole, it is an honor to have you on the call. Look forward to hearing all the things that you have to say. I will turn this over now to Rachel and Nicole. They're going to talk a little bit about how living in the ISS environment is a little bit similar to some of the things that we've been going through in our little quarantine here. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the 2 of you.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you for that intro.
Yes.
Great. So, Nicole, a lot of the people that I'm sure are tuned into this call have applied to go to space at Space for Humanity. Many of them have dreamt of going to space their whole lives. Some of them maybe like me were a teenager or in their mid-20s when they realized that going to space was a dream of theirs. So I want to know just like a little bit about your background. So did you dream of being an astronaut your whole life? What ultimately led you to being an astronaut?
Wow, I think, maybe, I would hope that I don't necessarily look at, but, I had the opportunity as a kid to watch, the first moon landing. And I tell you, even at 7, I think something like that, you realize that it's really extraordinary, right? And I did. But I don't think, like a lot of my colleagues who said from the time they saw that moon landing, they knew that that was what they were going to pursue. I didn't feel that at the time, but I knew, wow, this is really impressive. This is something that, I need to pay attention to at least. I think the thing that was big for me was having really, when I look back kind of in hindsight at inspiration for all of this, it was having parents that shared what they loved with me, right? My mom, a very creative person, and I got, I think, kind of the artsy craftsy side of, things from her. If I was going to get to a ballet class, it was, thanks to my mom. And if I was going to get out to the airport, where my dad, who loved to build and fly airplanes, would spend a lot of time, and we did as a family. And I think, just long story short, I developed this love of flying through that experience. And I wanted to fly myself, but I also wanted to know how things fly. And that led me to, studying aeronautical engineering. I discovered there that, wow, if you want to know how airplanes fly, why would you not want to know how rocket ships fly? And very fortunate growing up in Florida to have gone to school right up the road from the Kennedy Space Center. As I was graduating from college, we were starting to get back into flight with the Space Shuttle program. Sadly, after the Challenger accident, when we were coming back to flight. And I just knew I wanted to work for NASA. I wanted to help spaceships fly and help astronauts fly to space. But it was a really long time, probably 9 into the 10 years of working as a NASA engineer, very fortunate to be there at Kennedy Space Center, that I started thinking about the astronaut job as something that wasn't necessarily only what other special people get to do. And I think that was the big moment for me. Was I realized that 99.9% of an astronaut's time, by what I was seeing, was not actually spent in space. It was down here on Earth. And I saw what that job was like. And I was encouraged by mentors to pick up the pen and fill out the application. And as I was doing that, I realized, wow, I must have always wanted to do this. This must have been something that was just back there, kind of lingering as a goal, but I just think I kind of self-doubted myself out of even, thinking that it's something I should consider. I highly recommend that people pick up the pen. If you do nothing else, pick up the pen and fill out the application. You have control of that, right? We do so, especially young women too tend to kind of doubt ourselves out of things when, there really is opportunity out there if we do the stuff that we at least have control of.
Yeah. And it sounds like mentorship was a really big part of you, like growing that confidence to do that as well.
Yeah, it was huge. And I got to show you, I normally, I don't know if I've showed you this before, Rachel, but I normally show this like to kids when I'm doing, kid talks and stuff. But one of those mentors who is a dear friend, Jay Honeycutt, when I met him, he was the director of shuttle operations at Kennedy Space Center. He went on to become the center director there. And before that, he worked for NASA for years. He's one of the guys that was helping solve Apollo 13's problems and stuff like that. And he shared with a group of young engineers that started out at KSC this motto of, here's how we can, not why we can't. Right. And I think that has just been it's a part of everything I think about in terms of solving problems since then. And, that's what mentors do, right? They throw out these little nuggets to you. They help you perhaps see things in yourself that you might not have seen yourself. And, and they encourage that. And Jay was one of those people who just said, pick up the pen. He didn't say, oh, Nikki, you'll make the greatest astronaut there ever was. He just, put me in a position to consider myself that I had control of something and I should do it.
Yeah. Totally. Amazing. Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
Okay, so many areas that I want to touch on with you today. One is, so Jared announced that at the beginning you're an Aquanaut, so you're a certified scuba diver, and I'm not sure what specific certification you hold, but I know it's something that you love. And then you said growing up you always loved flying. And I personally remember as a kid, I didn't even have an interest in space at the time, but every time I was on the airplane, I would have my eyes peeled to the window.
Yeah.
And so like, what's the connection between that exploration of the sea and exploration of air, and then ultimately that drive for exploration of space?
Well, I think it's really, I think it speaks to a little bit of what I see in the messaging of Space for Humanity. I think in the messaging, that Frank has been trying to get out, with this whole idea of the overview effect. And it just ultimately comes down to this just natural interconnectivity of everything, right? I think that's kind of on the, maybe looking at it from, a less tangible way, but I think it is. It's like, we can go to, the depths of the ocean. We can go underwater to, we joke around it being like inner space, right? We can go to inner space, and it is absolutely like the best analog to what it's like to live and work in outer space. And we could talk all day about this. I think there's so many, just beautiful comparisons between the two places. Number one being, you go down to 60 feet and you're living on the Aquarius habitat, and your body after an hour is saturated with nitrogen. You're not swimming to the surface safely to, escape a problem that happens down there. You have to deal with it at 60 feet underwater. Same thing is true in space. Even though we have the Soyuz as a rescue vehicle, we're not just going to hop, you just can't anytime you want hop into the Soyuz and fly home. You have to learn to deal with those issues in space. And yeah, everything about it is just this beautiful analog. And I think from a perspective standpoint, I think about it that way too. I have vivid memory. One of my best friends, colleagues, Ron Guerin, he and I were on the same Aquarius mission together. And the day that we were like minutes before we were about to open the hatch and, come back up from that mission, we were sitting in front of the window. We had these big porthole kinds of windows on the habitat, and we're looking out at this just stunning coral reef, the life out there. And we both just looked at each other and said, you know what, if we never go to space, this has been, just such an incredible opportunity to have a better understanding of this planet that we share with all of these little creatures that are out here that you just don't see on a daily basis, right? But they, for some reason, are inhabiting this planet. They have a role in how life survives, and not to mention the whole ocean that was around us, but just in awe of what we just experienced and what we were able to, with our eyes see and feel out the window. The same exact thing happens to you in space. And I think that's why you have so many of us that have flown in space saying, holy moly, highly recommend it. I hope anybody who can gets to do it, but please do not use that, not going as your reason for not appreciating, the awe and wonder that's around us every day. We are surrounded by it. And we just have to kind of open up our eyes, our spirit to that, that perspective in a way that lets us, take it in from what's in our own backyard even.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm thinking about snorkeling and scuba diving and having that experience of truly like a new environment on our planet, but like it's like its own new world. And me doing that as a kid, I think primed my brain for my love of space. And I love what you said about there's no excuse for not cultivating that awe and wonder just on a daily basis. So before we go into your experiences of that in space, I would love to hear, like, on the planet, talking about on Earth, what are ways that you like to bring that in?
Well, I think definitely, there's two that you mentioned. I mean, flying to me, I so many times have the person sitting next to me say, would you mind putting the shade down? I'd like to watch the movie. I'm like, do you see what's out? What you have out the window? I really hope we never get to that place in space where we're like, oh no, I'd really like to put the shutter on the cupola windows so I can watch my movie or whatever. I think there's just little portholes we have. You mentioned scuba diving or snorkeling. It's kind of like what's going on with us right now. We've kind of shrunk our, the window we have to look out of. But I think when we do that, sometimes it gives us this better, I'm kind of doing that, gives us this better ability to, hone in on the things that are around us that we might not have looked at or appreciated, a little bit differently before. I encourage anybody who can to get in the water and do that, to be in a place where, in one sense, you are not in the one in control, right? The life that lives in that place on a normal basis are the ones in control, but you're getting to experience it and see it in a way that you don't normally get to do, right? Same thing with flying. I know that's not available to everyone, but holy moly, climb up the hill, down the street from your house, or, just go sit out back. I mean, I find now, and I know I'm rambling, I find now when I'm sitting out in my own backyard, I am really, really trying to look at the place in a whole new way. And this is a place that I thought I already knew, right? But I can look at, the hibiscus bush back there, or the water, that's running down the canal or whatever, and just, just try to think about it in a little bit more like mindful way, thoughtful way. And I remember once seeing a video of this guy who does this thing on mindfulness, and it's like, get your feet on earth, plant your feet barefoot in the grass, stand there, make this connection, feel your feet against the dirt until you don't even notice the difference between your feet and the planet anymore. And then look up. Look up and think about how you are on a planet, and this blue, this air that surrounds you, that we all kind of get this sense that it just goes on forever, right? And think about how it doesn't, and how we're protected by it. And there's this space that we're flying through. And I'm going to hush up now because I can go on about this stuff forever, Rachel.
I'm loving it, Nicole. So good. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So much coming to mind there. Just thinking about this hike that I take near my house, and every time I notice something different, every time, every moment of it, there's something different to notice. And that's just how dynamic and awe-inspiring life is. And one of the biggest aspects of awe that I've learned from doing research on it is that feeling of being part of something greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what you're speaking to. Okay. So, okay, let's keep it on Earth for a little bit longer. I want to know more.
We always got to bring it back to Earth, right? It's kind of like the talk of the thing. Yeah.
It's so easy to be up there in space. So I want to know about training as an astronaut, because we're obviously, with Space for Humanity, we're working on doing overview leadership training. So we'll be training our astronauts so that they can implement their experience for largest impact on Earth. And totally different game than what you do as a NASA astronaut. So I would love to hear, what were the most meaningful skills that you gained from training to be a NASA astronaut that are helpful to you today?
Wow. I think there's a number of them. One is that, kind of gaining this comfort from being in places, doing things that take you out of your comfort zone, right? There's a lot of the training that we do that before I, started doing it, I was like, man, I don't know if I'd be comfortable doing it. I don't know if I'd be, the Nemo training, the Aquarius underwater stuff. I always considered myself a recreational diver. I didn't want my mask off. I didn't want anybody telling me that I have to, take everything off and then put it all back on, and and then swim for however long doing these line search things without a mask on, and sharing a regular. I didn't want to do that. That was not my idea of scuba diving, right? My idea of scuba diving was I'm comfortably in all of my equipment, and I'm experiencing all the beauty around me and stuff, and I'm feeling good about it. I know what I need to do if something goes wrong, but I don't want that, Yeah. Whereas this was all about, and I think a lot of astronaut training is all about all the stuff we think can go wrong, all the stuff we know goes wrong, and how are you, going to deal with that? And it's amazing, just the incredible stuff you can learn about yourself, learn about what you can manage yourself when you're put into those kinds of situations. And I never felt like anybody was going to let me die during training or anything like that, but I was certainly challenged, to the point of, okay, you've got to be able to deal with this without freaking out. How do you get to that point, right? I use the Nemo stuff as an example because before going to do it, I knew that the preparation that they were going to make us go through, right, was going to be beyond anything I'd ever done as a diver, as a swimmer even. And so I knew that I needed to find my way. Okay, how do I learn how to swim on one breath for that distance, or twice that distance, so that when I do it for real, I won't freak out? How do I learn to manage without my mask on my face? How do I learn, all of these things? And so I found people that helped me do that, and, got that comfort in what I knew would be uncomfortable to me, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And then, and I think that, when we go and do things um, like live and work in space, I mean, we're pushing ourselves beyond what is like normally comfortable for us. We're pushing ourselves beyond, uh, what we think can even be possible just technically, right? And we decide to do it. We use this whole here's how we can, not why we can't thing, and we make it happen. I don't know if that's answering your question at all, but I think that in doing that, that then frees us up when we're having the experience, of being in space, of working in space. I would imagine, for the Space for Humanity astronauts that fly and are going there with a little bit different mission in mind.
Mhm.
But in the end, I think it ends up being kind of the same, because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't think that that experience I had should result in something actionable from me, right? That I should use this perspective I had of Earth there. I was doing all this complex work, with the science and, the things that are going on the station. But the human experience of it, the sucking in of the awe and wonder out the window, the realizing where I was in this connection, all of these kinds of things, that left me wanting to share it in a way that was beyond just, oh, we're doing this science to make life better on Earth for this, that, or the other. It's about, okay, how do I take that and share it in a way that other people can feel like they're experiencing that themselves, and that they then want to take action that says, here's how I can help improve life on Earth for everybody that I share this planet with. That's my hope of what, whether we call, citizen astronauts, explorers, whatever word we use to describe this experience that you and others, I hope, will have the opportunity to take, is, what do you do with it? It's bigger than just the moments, the hours, the days that you'll spend in space. It's, what do you take away from it and do with it? And to be conscientiously thinking about that, like I think you guys are trying to make happen before you go. Kind of put a mission in place. It might not work out to be exactly what you think it's going to be or how you want to do it when you get back, but at least to have that kind of present in your mind before you go, that, part of my mission is going to be what I do with this afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And then, as you know, Anusha Ansari, she went to space and she came back and she's doing amazing work with X Prize now. And when she initially came back, she was doing work to bring women and girls into STEM fields. And then astronaut Scott Parazynski, he came back and he started an initiative specifically to get political leaders into space. Yeah. And then you came back and you started Space for Art Foundation. Ron Guerin started Fragile Oasis. So it's like this huge range of initiatives that people are starting. So what is it about the overview effect that like makes that range, that range possible?
Well, I think it's that it's a human thing, I mean, by us going to space, we put, kind of the human in human spaceflight, right? These are things, the experiences we're having are not the kind of experiences that, that the robotic probe can have. I mean, they can share it with us through, really impressive, very thankful to get, the kind of video and imagery that comes back. But I think it's the human in the human spaceflight that feels, I hope all of us do, feel a responsibility, an obligation, and get a joy out of sharing it in whatever thoughtful, meaningful way we can come up with. And everybody does do it differently. I mean, I believe my friends, my colleagues who are, have gone to work at space companies, are trying to apply, okay, what did I learn? How can I make something better because of what I learned? They're going off and teaching at universities, or they're, I had one or two people, they've gone off and they've now kind of separated themselves, and they're focusing on homeschooling their children. I mean, these are things that, every individual who experiences finds their way to like get it out. and as thoughtful a way as they can. And for some, it's doing art with kids. For others, it's, very focused on what are the challenges that the planet has, and, like with X Prize and Anusha and those guys. Yeah, but I think underlying it all is that, is the awe and wonder side of it. Even for that professor that's in the classroom, or for the guy that's working at the space company, I guarantee you that perspective is being shared somewhere along the way.
Yeah. And then I'm thinking about, so there's that clear array of astronauts who come back and who have this drive to create greater impact in the world. And then there's also, I've heard a few cases of ones who come back and are suffering from some sort of like mental illness, or from like, just, it seems like that view had an opposite kind of impact on them. Are you familiar with those kinds of cases? And if so, how is that something that we can be careful of?
Yeah, I think that that's something that occurred, much earlier in our programs, where there was so much hype for the person from the perspective of this, almost making them feel like this is the greatest thing you'll ever do in your life. How could anything be better, right? I've actually had people approach me with that question. Oh, Nicole, you've been to space, you did that, you achieved that. How, I mean, really, like, straight, how could anything you ever do ever again, be better than that?
Yeah.
And you just sit there and look at them like, should I, put the knife in right now, and I'm like, that is so, I look at this like, and I think most of my colleagues do, like, oh my gosh, we were blessed, fortunate with this experience, this very special vantage point on our planet, and who and where we all are in space together, and not to mention the opportunity to go and to do this work. It's kind of that being part of something bigger thing that's not just about the adventure of riding on a spaceship or floating in space, but it's about all of that work being to improve life here on Earth. I mean, I wouldn't have strapped on to 7 million pounds of exploding rocket engine thrust stuff underneath me with a 7-year-old son at home if I didn't think that it was bigger than that ride to space, right? And so that to me means I need to know, and I do know this, that was just part of this journey that I have for the rest of my life. How do I use it to make the next mission, which, I got this Unity suit here behind me, and the work that we're doing with these kids and having these conversations, I think I went to space to be able to do this. And to then hopefully have a positive impact that way. Just use that experience, just keep using it. And oh my gosh, about things that are better in life after flying in space, I'm watching my 17-year-old son figure out what he wants to do with his life. To watch him have the experience of meeting people like you guys and the folks that I trained with and worked with, and that aren't just from here or, when I worked in Houston, but they're from all over the planet. And him getting this, understanding of, hey, we are all Earthlings living on this planet. Some of us might live differently than others, but that's okay. And really having, just watching in awe of how he appreciates that and what he does with his life because of it. So, yeah. I hope that it's not. I mean, I really, as more and more people start going to space, I think if it's put on a list, like it's this top of the list, bucket list thing that, oh, I have to do this before I die kind of thing, it could put you in a position of it feeling like, oh, I achieved that, nothing will get better. And I think it just needs to be, when it happens, it needs to be like this stepping stone to how do I use it? And then, everything I do from there just be better because of it, not that it was this, all encompassing thing in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move.
You can't get a short answer out of me, can you, Rachel?
No, it's great. It's amazing. let's go up to the International Space Station. So we were showing before an image of you looking out of the cupola, which is the I believe it's a 360-degree view, the only 360-degree view of the Earth on the International Space Station. And to my understanding, all the rest of the windows on the International Space Station are comparable to airplane windows. And
yeah, I call it a bay window. Because it's not just this, bigger, rounder, window. It's made up of 7 windows with a central, the round central one, and it actually sticks out of the station. So you're not just looking, the rest of the windows, even if they're earth facing, are round, and you kind of got to get your face like almost right up on it to, see horizon to horizon. This, it's just like presented to you in all the glory of from one side of the earth to the other kind of thing, with that black of space just surrounding it. And I mean, it is incredible. I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like overwhelmingly beautiful almost, and even the little flat windows are that way too. But the first time you float into the cupola and just see it like, surround you, really surround you. I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it, just thinking about doing it. And yeah, this imagery, Liam, this app, this system that you can have. I mean, the views we get on TV now, the imagery that NASA is sending back with this, thin blue line horizon. I mean, that's what it is. And then you just feel like you're kind of in the middle of it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I remember being at a conference, the SEDS conference, and it was in Florida a few years ago, and you were on a panel with astronaut Sandy Magna. And I remember you talking about the cupola and you saying that when you would go there, you would just it was like meditative. You would just get lost in it, and you had to set a timer, because otherwise you would completely lose track of time. So can you tell me, I want to hear about that experience as it relates to the overview effect, and what did looking out of the cupola, what did you learn from it, and how did it influence who you are now?
Yeah, I think it even, my first flight, I didn't have the cupola. So, it was in front of the little or the big windows that were earth facing. We had a couple in the Japanese module that, these round portholes at the end of the module that you get a bit of a horizon view out there. Yeah, the overview effect, that feeling, that emotion, that kind of, how it gets into you, becomes part of you thing. It didn't take a cupola to do that.
Yeah.
Even in those flat windows, I had to set the timer. I mean, absolutely, because there's just like this transcendent feeling about it, this immersion into it, that time just went by. And the closest thing I can compare down here on Earth now is that feeling, to meditate, to be in a place where you can kind of separate from everything else and just experience what's around you. Yeah, and then we have a friend who's doing float tanks, where you can do that, like in VR. And I'll tell you that floating in those float tanks, that's the closest I've felt to what floating in space feels like, as long as you have the temperature right. But there is, in terms of overview effect, I think for me, the simple reality of it was when I looked out, not just in awe of how beautiful it was, but with this just like really kind of internal knowledge that, oh my gosh, I live on a planet. We just don't, I mean, I knew that before I went to space, right? You know it. We learn it in kindergarten, probably even earlier from our parents in some way. I knew that everybody that's on this planet are human beings, right? But when I looked at it from there, I'm like, wow, we're all Earthlings.
Mm-hmm.
And, only border that matters, that thin blue line of atmosphere that blankets and protects us all. That to me was like the simple summation of overview effect for me. Just that all-encompassing who and where we are together in space.
Yeah.
The reality check of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's my ultimate goal too, is just that, like, what would it be like? And actually, maybe this is a question for you, is what would it be like if everyone on the planet actually comprehended and like understood that fact that we live on a planet? Because it is
Yeah.
totally different. It's like I learned the facts in science class, but it wasn't until I was in my late teens that I actually realized we actually live on a planet.
I know, in space. Yeah.
Yeah.
This ginormous universe thing that gets described to us, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Ron has a really great way, some of the folks he worked with helped him like put together this idea of, when we're in school, I mean, there's that little globe that's, over in the corner somewhere, right? But most of what we study in school, even in science class, I think, when we talk about a planet, we talk about like parts of it and the composition of it and, the geography of it and stuff. And then we put it on this flat map, right? And we've drawn all our own little lines on it to make us think that we're all separated and, these kinds of things. And if you fold the map just right, you might be able to make the sphere because it's not flat. It really is what that oblate spheroid thing, whatever we learn in science do about it. But I think we just don't end up with enough like visual, tangible understanding of what planet means, like living on a planet means. And it's why, I mean, I'll just throw the plug out for, the show One Strange Rock that I had the opportunity to participate in. And I think what was so great about a show like that is, and I think it should be in every kid's science class, quite honestly, is that it kept over and over talking about who and where we are, how we live, how it was created, what as best we understand as a planet, and kept like, zooming out. Oh, yep, there we are. And then come back in. Where's that otherworldly place in Ethiopia with the acid lakes where we can't live, but things do, just really just the awe of what this planet is too. And I think that the more and more things we have like that, the more and more people that get to go to space and see it, the more people realize that, you can put your feet in the grass and look up and think about it that way too. Um, when that gets into kind of your consciousness, your everyday consciousness, I've just found that, I mean, I think about things differently. I think about the relationships I have with people differently. I think about the decision I'm making to buy that new shirt at the store differently. I mean, everything, the food I eat, all of it becomes just interconnected to everything that I know is surviving on this planet that we all share.
Mm.
I think it's a consciousness thing, really, an awareness that can come through. I hope everybody gets to do it by, viewing it from space. But I don't want us to have to wait until that happens for everyone to kind of get on the planet Earthling thin blue line bandwagon. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really is all about perspective.
Yeah.
And people can gain that perspective, like you said, from watching One Strange Rock. For me, it was from watching Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos.
Yeah.
It can be, and it can be going to space. It can be scuba diving. It can be looking at that gorgeous view of the mountains. Just anything that makes you feel connected and
Yeah.
part of something bigger than yourself. And then one thing that we talk a lot about on our team is how, like, when our perspectives change, ultimately that will make our behavior change as well. And that's
I think that's absolutely it. That's absolutely it. Opening yourself up, first of all, to that awe and wonder that is surrounding us, letting it letting it do what it does to you, and change that perspective of, that understanding of the interconnectivity. I mean, I've told you the story before about, looking at Earth from space, and we can do this with the pictures and videos too. And then I kind of transport myself into, kind of pretend like I'm in space when I see these things now. But and I think anybody can do that. It's like watching Earth at night. You see all these little city lights where everybody lives. You see the darkness of the ocean and where people don't live, and then you watch just the weather, like watch the phenomena, like moving across the planet. And I think the thing that, when it came to like the interconnectivity of everything, I think where the light bulb really like went on for me was watching Earth at night and watching thunderstorms.
Mm.
And I know Mimi's on here, maybe some other people from Florida where, we get a lot of them, these thunderstorms. And as a kid growing up, I just thought, and probably until I went to space even, thunderstorm, okay, it's done. Now it's done. It's gone.
Yeah.
And you watch it from space or you watch it in a view from space and it's like, oh my gosh, it might start over Florida. But those lightning strikes, I mean, they look like these tentacles. There's just like it's wrapping around the planet, from Florida to Africa until it disappears. And it looks like, in science class, when you see the imagery of like what neurons firing in a brain would look like, that's what it looks like. Like it's just, like the Earth is alive. And I'm like, that was my like, aha, wow, there's not a single thing down there that isn't connected in some way to itself on the planet and to, all the space that surrounds it. Mm-hmm. And that's a very humbling thing to experience that way. And again, you don't have to go into space to experience that. And even from our science classes, we get this sense of how tiny our planet is, right, in this grand scheme of the universe. And I've even heard words like, that's insignificant. We got this insignificant little planet in, this ginormous universe, maybe multiverse that we haven't, discovered yet. And I just look at that like, you know what? There is nothing insignificant about this place. This is absolutely a size does not matter, kind of conversation, right? A little bit closer, a little bit further from the sun, not so good for us. And so there is absolute meaning in, who and where we are and how we're able to survive here. It's just like overwhelmingly significant.
Yeah, it is miraculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you both. This has been amazing. I don't want it to stop. We have some great questions that have come in. So we're going to take a little minute here. We got about 15 minutes at the top of the hour to take a couple of questions from the crew here. I'll start off with one real quick from Mary-Lise Bender, who's frequently showing up on these calls. Thank you. And she says, Nicole, how do you feel about this new era of private space travel? As access opens up to more people and new perspectives through the experience of space travel, how do you think that may impact our culture through the messages they bring back?
I'm like thumbs up, totally for it. I'm really hopeful, and I know it's not exactly the same thing, but we've got a step forward coming up at the end of this month with Bob and Doug getting ready to travel to the space station on one of the crewed SpaceX Dragon vehicles. I know the hope is that will open up to more and more people. The suborbital flights, I don't think it's going to take an orbit of the planet to just get that in you, get that perspective of Earth that way in you. I think there's nothing but positive to come from it, Mary. I mean, I don't know how it could be any other way. If you go and you take this trip, this journey, I guess, with, already, like I get the sense from so many people with the idea in mind that you are just going to take it in, absorb it, and go use it in a good way. I think it's kind of see it, be it, right? You're going to go, you're going to have that happen, and you are going to make it happen when you get back. That you're going to want to do nothing else but share it with as many as people as you possibly can. And that's going to be with people you don't even know. I mean, the people that love you, that are around you, they're at some point going to say, I don't need to hear that story again. But the hope is that they've taken it in too. They've taken it in. I watch my family, my friends that I've had the chance to, they're using it themselves now. It's become part of them as well. And you'll make it part of the people you share it with too. And that's just, I don't want to say it's kind of like this kumbaya thing. I get criticized sometimes for using that word, but I think that's a good word to use. I mean, it's like, it is a very unifying message that I think will come back from anyone that experiences it. And the more, the better. Yeah.
We agree. Excellent.
Yeah.
Here's another one from Graham Lau, and this has been one that we've been tossing around quite a bit. So we'll give you a stab here.
Okay.
How do you think, this is a longer question, I'm going to give you the last part of it. How do you think we can better sculpt our language to be more inclusive in bringing more of us together in space exploration? He was speaking specifically to inclusivity and representation, I think, in the space community.
Well, I think, yeah, that is a difficult one. But I think that I'll just use this as an example. We talk about, I get a lot of requests to come and speak to, Girl Scout troops or organizations like Girls Who Code, or, that are really trying to encourage young women of all flavors, I'll just say, young women to pursue, STEM fields, to discover what they are really passionate about and how they can take that and use it in their lives ahead. And I think the reason is because you want to see, and young girls especially need to see somebody that looks like them doing the things that they might at this point think are impossible or too hard or, whatever. And if they can see somebody like me doing it or having done it, that might encourage them, like, wow, if Nikki can do that, maybe so can I. And I think that's just what has to happen in all of the messaging, all of the communication we do. And it's not just about space exploration, it's about everything. If we're trying to encourage more and more people from every place on the planet, that represent every, element of diversity that, us Earthlings are comprised of, then we need to be presenting that as part of our messaging, right? And that could be, going and looking for imagery across different space agencies for, the kind of people that we want other people to see are part of this already, right? NASA, I think, has always been really pretty progressive. It's kind of hard to think about it that way, but has been really pretty progressive when it comes to the overall demographic of the NASA family, the NASA crew. And that's not just astronauts, but that's, everybody working in mission control, doing training, all of it. We can go back and look 50 years ago, and in the Launch Control Center, there was just one woman. And it was a pretty white space in that, in that Launch Control Center, right? Mission control, there were none. Launch Control Center 1, Joanne Morgan. Now, you look at Mission Control Center, you look at the Launch Control Center, which both, by the way, are run by women. And you look across the teams there, you look across the training teams, the engineers, and it's just this mass of humanity. It's just representation. And I don't know how they did it. Rachel, you mentioned Sandy Magnus and I doing this panel. She and I have talked about this a number of times. What did NASA do? Was it forced at some point? And then all of a sudden it became just this natural reality. But we need to figure it out so we can spread it, everywhere. And it's just accepting that. I think it goes back to accepting the fact that, of whatever shape, size, color, gender you are, we are all Earthlings. And that's where it all has to, the greatest things come when we kind of look at it in the simplest truths are, I think, what make challenging things possible too.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'll take another question here from Rochelle Gribble. Thank you, Rochelle. I'm going to add a little bit to it too, just should space, I like how she framed this. Should space tourism be promoted as an extreme sport? What kind of training do you think is required? And I'll add on to that too, just your general feelings about the kind of the commercial space tourism world and your feelings on that.
I don't know about that extreme sport. I think that, for quite a while, it's going to be a challenging thing to do. It's not, if you look at kind of the launch profile and the landing profile for some of the vehicles that we're talking about right now, even suborbital, what your body is going to have to experience to get to and from this place of awe and wonder, right? It's not, I mean, it is challenging. And so I think, sadly, we'll have to look at, making sure that, to the best of whoever the companies are, the commercial companies are that do this, that, they'll be able to take care of the people that they transport to and from space for this experience. I guess you could think of that as a little bit extreme, but I think what we know is we will know the bounds of what that should entail, right? How many Gs you'll have to push to get there and back, what amount of time you're going to be spending either floating or, in whatever other environment when you're in the spacecraft in space. We know the bounds of those, right? So we can understand better how we need to prepare and take care of the people that will be experiencing them. And the thing that I like, without going into the details of all of that, what you'll have to train to do and all of that, is that it will just get easier over time, right? I kind of look at it like, my husband is one of the most intelligent sci-fi people that I know. And I've learned from him to look for how sci-fi has become sci-fact in the world, right? And if you look at that, I mean, I really envision the Star Trek days where, or maybe the Expanse days even, where we're traveling, in these vehicles and we can do it comfortably. And we just understand better the extremes and the risks of doing it. And we just better and better have technology to manage it. So, Rochelle, I'm sorry, I don't know if that actually answered the question, but I think that it's, I think the lovely thing about it is that it's totally possible for a very large number of people to be able to experience and do this, and for us to understand how we can make that safe for them.
Excellent. Well, and I'll add one other another question from somebody here that sort of dovetails onto that. What are some of the key things that you wish that we're doing or that we could be doing to promote human space flight, to expand access to space now?
I think we really need to do, and I think NASA is trying harder at this too, but we need to, right now, we don't do a very good job sharing what's happening on the International Space Station, right? We don't do a good job. I can go down the street right here and I guarantee you I'll find probably a majority of the people won't even know we have a space station. So I think we need to really look carefully at what we're already doing that's so awesome in space, and the representation across these different countries that are participating and somehow peacefully, successfully making this happen, right? With people in space for 20 years. I mean, as long as my son has been alive, 15, representatives from 15 different countries have been working peacefully, successfully on this International Space Station, which is a masterpiece of technology on its own, let alone the way we've established these relationships and we're doing, work together that is about this common mission of good and improving life on Earth for everyone. We need to get the word out about that. We need to show what's already going on up there and let people see that it's not just the US, it's not just Russia, it's not just any one of these countries, but this is a collective thing that's happening. And I personally believe it's just going to continue to pull more and more, representation from the planet involved as we explore further off of it. And as we start talking more and more about commercial and kind of the tourist explorer kind of thing. It's got to be with this idea that it represents the planet as a whole, not just any one place on the planet.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. All right, last one here. How can someone who's passionate about forwarding the perspective that comes from the overview effect make a difference in the world starting right now? What's the last message you want to leave our audience with?
Well, I want to leave everybody with the three simple lessons that came to me. And that's just to really pull into your life conscientiously, consciously, all of those words, pull into your life what you already know. And that's that you live on a planet We are all Earthlings, and the only border that matters is that thin blue line of atmosphere that blankets and protects us all, and that you are, the crew members of Spaceship Earth. That would be it. I will zip it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This has been an excellent conversation. We're right at the top of the hour. Thank you, Rachel, for your very thoughtful questions and this great conversations that you two had. Nicole, thank you for spending the time with us and for sharing your experiences. I can't get enough of it, and I'm sure that goes for others as well. We're grateful for that. And we're grateful to all of you for showing up on this call from all over the world. It's been amazing. And I'm seeing stuff in the chat. It's been beautiful seeing Frank White showing up here. Thank you, Frank. Always grateful for your presence in this. We're grateful for all the support that we get from all of you for helping to support the Space for Humanity mission. As a reminder, we will be posting this on our YouTube channel here shortly, probably over this week, and look out for that. Please feel free to share it and help us amplify the message. We appreciate that. We also we have an announcement. We have a party coming up, a launch party. We're going to celebrate our future in space. Yeehaw. This is the historic Demo 2 launch, and we're having a party to commemorate the launch of the Dragon spaceflight to the ISS. This is the first time since 2011 that we've done this from American soil. That's really cool. And that helps. That's another investment in us all expanding access to space. We're really excited about that. We're honored to have Sarah Krutis, the host of Contact, and on the Discovery Channel and the Science Channel as our host. Super cool. She's going to be taking us into that celebration. We'll be sending out updates this week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, save the date for Monday the 25th at 11 Eastern. That's about it. Thank you both for this amazing conversation. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for supporting this mission to expand access to space for all of humanity. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Jared.
Nice to be here.